I think this AI thing that we're just kind of stepping through the threshold of now is going to be great disruption in 5 years. So, and I don't think there's a sector it's not going to touch. There's certain things that I think it will touch more than others, but I think the rate of change, I think we're at industrial revolution 2.0. And I think learning and embracing this any way you can is going to make you valuable.
Quick favor before we jump in. It always surprised me that a large percentage of people who listen to this show regularly haven't yet subscribed. If you're a commercial real estate operator, investor, or builder who values conversations like this around deals, capital, and technology, please take 2 seconds and hit subscribe. It's a simple, free way to support the show. My commitment to you is that my team and I will continue bringing you higher level operators, stronger conversations, and real execution level insights every single week. Thank you. I truly appreciate it. Welcome back to the AI Edge podcast. I'm Luis Fernandez. This show is for operators, builders, and decision makers, the people doing real work, making real bets, and figuring out how to grow in a changing market. Today, I'm joined by Joe Rosinski, president and founder of Palms and Tides Land Development. Joe has a strong background across finance, risk management, acquisitions, and development. And today, he is focused on land development and single-family home projects in Southwest Florida. What makes Joe especially interesting is that he did not start in land entitlement and development. He evolved into it, moving from fix and flips and broader real estate investing into a much more complex and strategic part of the business. We're going to talk about evolving, how regulation and entitlement shapes the business, where real bottlenecks are in development today, and how technology and AI may start changing the way operators make decisions. Joe, welcome to the show.
Louis, good afternoon, and thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to the conversation today.
Fantastic. Joe, when someone asks you, what do you do today? What's the simplest way you explain that?
I tell them that I buy raw parcels and land parcels, and I add value to them and package them in a way that a end investor may want to purchase them for their own development, or it's something we may hang on to ourselves and develop on, ourselves. That's pretty much what I tell them in a nutshell. I think most people can understand that pretty clearly.
Excellent. You've had a background in finance, enterprise risk, consulting, and real estate. How did that path eventually lead you into land development?
So it's a long. I'll make a long story short here. I became a licensed agent in 2003. I had a very strong mentor and someone that I was working out with at the time that was a broker at a local real estate company. Encouraged me strongly to get the mass real estate license, and I did. And I practiced from early, I think 2003 till 2005, 2006, and there were some big changes. We saw a lot of the things that were coming with the subprime crisis. And at that time, I was working full time as a real estate agent, helping to pave my way through school. And then I was also going for a finance undergraduate education at Eisenberg at UMass. And at the time that I was getting ready to graduate, I had a great opportunity that came from a management consulting firm, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and that's the rest was history. So I didn't really fit into the audit or the tax practice as much, so they stuck me in consulting. So all the guys that kind of flunk out of audit and in tax, that's where they stick them. I was definitely more of a conceptual free-based thinker, not as much of a ticker and tire, and I think that's what they were looking for. Although I do understand it pretty well, I just was able to really get my arms around evaluating business process, the enterprise strategy, and really, trying to add value in some of the service offerings that Price Waterhouse was offering at the time, and a lot of them we pioneered at that time, in line with the financial crisis of 2008 to 2009. We did a lot of commercial loan pledging efforts, so helping commercial banks pledge money to the Federal Reserve so that they could access TARP funds. A lot of sustainable cost reductions, a lot of making sure that limited and general partnership controls were in good order for reporting and to make sure there was a lot of transparency there. We helped a lot of big companies with that. Great experience, long and short, and then got into working for the Saudi government for a company called SABIC, which is Saudi Arabia Basic Industries Corp. It's now owned by Aramco, which is the largest company in the world. It's the largest. It's an oil interest that's owned in Saudi Arabia. The Gulf Cooperation Council residents are allowed to own it. And basically, there I was doing a lot of post-merger cleanup. So there was the Saudis in the '70s and the '80s. They started a chemical company called Sabic, and basically the way that they had acquired and got their business going was a roll-up strategy. They had bought business interests all over the world, and they largely left them alone and off the reservation, and they never made any effort to consolidate and integrate any of that into the corporate mothership. So basically, when I came along, there was a large company that they had purchased, the former GE Innovative Plastics business that was up in Pittsfield. And with that, I think they realized that they had such a big global footprint. The only way to really get some of the operational efficiency and to strategically be able to steer the ship quickly was to integrate all the companies. And that kind of came as a result of that merger. I got involved with doing a lot of the post-merger cleanup and integration work. We were rolling out software called SAP, Systems and Data Process, and now it's Systems and Process, and it's a German-based software enterprise company and software package that is at most of the oil and chemical companies. So we put that over about I think it was about 200 legal entities worldwide, and I think it was over $10 billion in revenue that we integrated into the parent ship there. So those efforts took place in China, they took place in the Middle East, they took place in Europe, and they took place throughout the Americas. So I spent a lot of time traveling to those different sites and regions and working with the teams to integrate it from a risk management and a finance perspective. That was kind of my wheelhouse. So great gig, and there came a point where I think you get comfortable in corporate America after a while. You get a chunky salary, and they had made the decision that they were going to move to another part of the country that I just wasn't interested in relocating to. And I made the decision at that time to go out on my own and start. It was Rosinski Realty initially, and then as I've gotten more focused in Florida, it became Palms and Tides. So I started that business about 9.5 years ago, and it's been rolling ever since. So it was definitely a good move to go out on my own at that point and come back into real estate full fold. Initially, we started out, Lewis, doing a lot of fix and flip. So we were buying mostly single family houses, adding value back to them, and then reselling them on the market. We did, I think, 4 or 5 deals the first year that I got in it, and we had some good hits, and I became hooked. I really liked it. The market has changed in terms of not so much. I think the end demand is always going to be there for housing. I think nationally, we're still short as far as the number of total units that we need for people and to provide in future demand. However, I think that a lot of with the building code and a lot of the energy and the stretch code that has changed, I think that has made the environment very difficult. And I also think you also have a flood of new entrants, that came with the HGTV shows, in that right around that same era. And I think it glamorized the whole fix and flip thing for a lot of people. So it became a very crowded space. And that's when I realized, about 3, 4 years ago, it made the sense to start to pivot into doing the land entitlement. And I started doing that in Florida, mostly in Southwest Florida, but I do some on the East Coast in Vero Beach, Indian River County area, and we build alongside it as well. So some of the parcels we will keep and develop on for ourselves, and then the rest of it, we will add value to. We'll get it ready and it fully entitled where someone else can pick it up, and then they can develop on it, and we'll offer and package it to them. So that's kind of the long answer of how I got to where I am and the evolution of our business at a high level.
What did you see in land development that made you think, this is where I want to go deeper?
When I was doing new construction here in Western Mass, I was fairly good at navigating the environmental process, the surveys, and just I understood the end game in terms of what another developer like myself would need to make sure that this thing is a good package that they can just buy it and permit immediately if it's something that they want to go to. I also like the idea that I was becoming the purveyor of selling the shovels and not tied to the success of the gold mine. So basically, the land, if I'm buying it from, my deal marketing that I was doing, when I was doing fix and flip, you get a lot of places that have parcels that are adjacent to it. Sometimes they're 5 or 6 acres and they can be subdivided as is. And maybe I have to knock an old house down or something like that. I was starting to get a lot more deal flow through my existing off-market marketing channels, and I said, "I think I really can do something here with it." We're able to do it here in Mass, and then in Florida, it's actually a lot easier to do because a lot of the subdivisions there are pre-planned, Lewis, years in advance, where, you had the Army Corps come in and you had a lot of different private developers come in, and a lot of the parcels have been platted, 50, 60, 70 years ago. So you can slice and dice them any way you want, and there's a lot of flexibility in how you do it. You can also buy raw, unentitled parcels there where you've got to, do all the legwork yourself to make it fully entitled. But I really saw the need for it, the need to package it for developers, and I liked where I was on the kind of on the risk spectrum of I'm not tied so much to the end product of the market. I'm kind of a middleman and more of a, like I said, I'm selling the shovels, the gold digging shovels and the prospecting picks, but I'm not tied to the success of the mine. As we all know, you've I'm sure you've been through it. You have some projects that they come in great. They come in, ahead of schedule, under budget. You have ones that go long, and with that is it's timely and it takes a lot of, it takes a lot more cost and a lot more investment to father it and finish it. So that's where we saw an angle there where we could flip capital in a more efficient way. We needed to allocate less capital. So our business became less capital intensive over time, which allowed us to free up to invest in other things like you. I'm invested in an RV park. We do a lot of non-working oil investment interests as well. And we do other, land deals and sometimes we do lend to other investors. So it allowed me to change the business trajectory and have some other strategic offerings that were a complement to the core business and things that we had knowledge about. So that's where I saw it. And it also, I'm more of a solopreneur where we have some contract employees, but I don't have, a large team. I wanted to purposely keep it that way. I left corporate. We had big teams of people we had to deal with. I really enjoyed working in a smaller teamed environment, and this was a way that I could scale it, keep my arms around it comfortably, but also have intimate access and knowledge to what was going on the front line.
For people who have never done land development, Joe, what's the biggest difference between flipping houses and developing land?
I think when you land development, you really have to see the end state first of what it could be and then how you would position it to package it to a developer. Whereas I think when the house is there that you're buying maybe secondhand and you have to improve, takes sometimes a little bit of time to go in and make it your own canvas where you can repaint it and retouch it to make it something that is markedly desirable to an end buyer. I think that there's a little bit of difference in that, and I think the skill set's a little bit different. Where some people may be strong as far as just the contracting, designing, which is more of a fix and flip of how skill set versus dealing with legal, dealing with state agencies, dealing with environmental agencies, kind of navigating some of the backwaters and the back channels to really make sure that you can unlock the value before you commit to a parcel and buying it, and making sure that your interest is going to be secure there and you have a good probability of being able to do what you want to do with it or package it in a way you want to do with it. So I think the end state has to be more in mind first when you buy land versus when you buy a house, where it's more of a what's the valuation and then what could be the potential back end here. So I think it's a little bit of a different analysis and a little bit of a different skill set with each one.
What gets more complex as soon as you move from buying an asset to actually entitling and developing land?
I think there's definitely complexity with both. I think when you're buying an asset that you're enriching or you need to improve to get to an exit point, whether it's like a burr thing where you want to, and keep it as a rental, or if you want to sell it and exit it or whatever the exit may be. I think there's a lot more contractual moving parts there with respect to securing the deal contractually with an offer, actually getting contractors in there and making sure you're protected and your terms and your interests are going to be served by what they're doing in there. You have a lot more people that you have to manage as well. So that's one of the other things. I think with the land entitlement, while there is some pieces of that, I think a lot of it is really needs to be around scoping with respect to some people will just use the word, oh, I just need a survey. Well, are you doing a geological survey or geographic where you can see, are there elements on there that, could be mined? Are there elements on there that are maybe valuable in some other way besides building a house? Does it have the topography on there where you can actually see elevation? Is it up maybe where I can put it somewhere where there's a view or could package it that way to someone? I also think the other thing is around just navigating and reading between the lines with dealing with some of the code enforcement, the environmental folks, and a lot of these committees that enable the approval process of these towns. And a lot of it is sidebar discussions. A lot of it is, I think, more you need to be a more diplomatically positioned and suited to actually make sure you can pull off successful negotiations and back channeling to make sure that you can actually do what you want to do with the land. So that's where I think that the skill sets are a little bit different in that sense. I think you have to be a little more patient with the land entitlement because not everything happens immediately. You may have to reach some people that are actors in the bigger play. You may require introductions. It may require back channeling or networking through other contacts you have to get them on board with you and to actually meet them. So I think it's a little bit more of a diplomacy type of engagement with land entitlement versus someone that's like a good asset manager and just a general manager with an asset improvement reposition sell situation.
Joe, what were some of the early lessons that you learned the hard way when you entered this side of the business?
So land, I think the biggest thing is even though there's not a asset on it, the actual, parcel is the asset. It's tremendously important to know what you're getting. Down in Southwest Florida, there's a lot of protected species down there. You have eagles, you have scrub jays, you have gopher tortoises. There's another number of things that are on these lots. And surprisingly, like a single gopher tortoise in Cape Coral costs 7 grand per tortoise to move. So if you've got a little den on there, it's one of those things that it could really change the basis of the deal if you've got a bunch of them, that are on there. I had a property down there that I bought a couple of years ago that didn't have it when I walked it. The developer next door had a gopher den, and it seems that thing ended up on my property. Now, I don't, and I know proof, I don't know. These things can move on their own. I have no idea, but it seems like it worked its way over. So that's another thing there is you always got to leave yourself a little more room in these deals, either for holding time, incidentals, the environment, or protected species may migrate onto your property. So those are some of the things that were down there, whereas up in the Northeast, we have protected species, but I don't think to the extent that they look after it down in Florida. So that was one of the lessons that I learned early on. And also too on that's more on the risk, what could go wrong side. I also learned something on the what could go right side. And one of those things, Lewis, was in a certain counties that are down there. There's a lot of people that were tired of getting 4, 5, 6 tax bills. They would buy 4 or 5 concurrent lots next to each other, and then they would call the town and plat them together so they got one tax bill. A lot of counties, you can just make a phone call with a one-page request to replat them as 6 lots, for example, and you can break it up immediately without a survey, without any type of environmental work, without any type of consultancy or going before any meetings or anything. And it's a request, and some of them you can do it as fast as a week after you close. So that was an area where I was like, this is kind of a honey hole where I can actually split up where work was already done previously, and the cities will recognize that and we'll move forward with it. So that was kind of on the positive side, and that's been one of the niches that I pursue down here in lots that I acquire.
Amazing. When you evaluate a land opportunity today, Joe, what are the first few things that you look at before you get excited?
Well, we have a buying criteria. So I want to make sure that, the land that we're buying is, it kind of meets our strike zone, Lewis, before we spend any time on it. So on our website, it's palmsandtides.biz. It's sell your land. And basically, we have a lot of wholesalers and homeowners and people that we're marketing to that we drive to that page that can see what is our strike zone. So it's like, hey, these are the communities we're buying in. And then here's some of the things that are minimum requirements before we even consider the lot for purchase. Obviously, we don't want them to have any protected species, any known wetlands. If the wetland is mostly wet and not, potential to be developed or viable for development, it's something we're going to pass on. Is there power at the curb? We can deal without water. A lot of times, there's a lot of septic, a lot of sewer down in, or I'm sorry, there's septic and well down in Southwest Florida and even on the East Coast of Florida, and a lot of communities that are more frontier communities that are being developed, but you need basic things like that. Is there a paved road in front of the property, or is it, an old dirt road? So things like that. Is it near a super busy intersection, or does it back up to an interstate or railroad tracks? You want to make sure that it's not too busy for residential, and you also want to make sure that it's not something that wouldn't be desirable to an end user. So we're basically kind of looking at it through that initial lens as our first screen to see if it just fits that. And then from there, we look at the price, and then we look at, all right, so the comps are selling it, $100,000 for the lot. We're generally purchasing somewhere between 50 to 70%, depending on the community, the risk, what we need to do, etc. So if we sense that the seller would be motivated somewhere in that 50 to 70 range, we'll go ahead and pull a trigger. We'll put an offer out there, usually cash, usually very low contingencies. We usually have a pretty quick due diligence period, just so that if someone wants to liquidate and exit quick, they have that option. And after they accept, we can generally do what we need to do within a week. And we'll let them know. If it's something that's larger and raw and unentitled, we'll have that discussion. But a lot of the parcels there are already entitled, or they need minimal due diligence to get them where they need to be. So that's something that we'll look at too. We'll evaluate that to see, how fast we can go, and when we can also then reposition that for exit afterwards.
Excellent information. You mentioned operating in a complex code and regulatory environment. From your perspective, what has gotten harder in the recent years?
So when I was a boy, I'm 43. When I was a boy, I did, was involved in different family additions and construction projects. And I remember the building inspector would come by once, twice. Maybe the building inspector was the plumbing, electrical inspector too. And there was a fire that happened in a Rhode Island nightclub. It was a great white rock concert. They were lighting off pyrotechnics inside of a historic theater that was basically like a tinderbox. And the exit doors had to open in instead of opening outward. It was basically it was a tragic comedy of errors, and a lot of people lost their lives and a lot of people were hurt as a result of the fire that happened from that. From that point forward in the early 2000s, the commercial and the residential building code in the most of the Northeast and then nationally as well, really got clamped down on hard. And a lot of lobbyists were introduced to the table. So it wasn't commercial practitioners. They weren't calling on the Lewises and the Joes of the road. It was mostly people that had products, or they wanted to sell you something to be, have a seat at the table. That was phase one, where it added a tremendous amount of cost to develop or redevelop a commercial building or any residential buildings. Compounding on top of that, later on, we got into deregging power here, and we started this in Massachusetts. I'll speak to just that. They introduced us to Mass Save. And basically, the way it works is in our power rates, we have rebates, a rebate program where they'll actually pay for insulation, energy improvements, etc. Now, conceptually, this sounds like a great idea. But what ends up happening is they go so far outside in one way where they want now anything that is carbon neutral. They don't help with anything gas, and everything is electric. Electric is by far the most expensive source of energy. And also they're it's behind a lot of the wind subsidy, the solar subsidy, which is also the most expensive sources of generation. And then on top of that, they add crazy things that they want in these houses that are built. They want, ERV systems where you have to, exchange inside outside air. You've got to put foam boards on your foundation walls, which costs thousands of dollars. You got to spray foam all these little orifices so you can pass your blower door test. I mean, on a build that's somewhere around 3,000 square feet in this area, it adds about 80 to 100 grand in cost to the project. So when you add that on top of the building code, and then you also add in that a lot of these towns, some towns are on the stretch code for energy and the new building envelope standard, and some towns aren't. And then you've got this guy over in this town that's got his little checklist. So you have non-local uniformity based on town by town that makes it challenging. You've got the heavy pylon from energy regulation that makes it very, very difficult. And then you also have the onerous building codes that they've added. So you've almost got in my view, you've got a trifecta of legislative pieces that are driven by regulation that are affecting everyone. And the thing is it's law. So if you try to go around one, you're not going to get your certificate of occupancy. You can't rent it, you can't sell it, you can't really do anything with it until you have that. So you have to. I think that that's been the biggest change with developing anything commercially or residentially in the United States in the last 20 years. And it's made it prohibitively expensive to do that. Now, on the commercial side, and I've looked at a lot of these buildings, I don't want to step too deep, but I think a lot of the stuff that was built, and I see it in Springfield and Hartford, Providence, even, down on the Connecticut shore. A lot of these buildings were built in the 70s and the 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. They're loaded with asbestos. They're loaded with all this stuff that we don't put in houses today. So remediating is prohibitively expensive. A lot of it's buried in areas that are in the physical structure. You may not know until you start renovating, what's actually in there. Very difficult to test. I don't think anyone, an inspector's not going to let you take a jackhammer to a building to, hey, can I just chip out a little piece of, right? It's like, it's not reasonable. When you own it, you buy it, you own it, you can do what you want with it. I think that's also made it a little bit more of a challenging environment here is a lot of the hazardous materials that are in buildings in New England, because a lot of it was mill space, it was industrial space, and there's chemicals that are legacy chemicals that may be still in there that you have to abate before you do anything. So the environmental clampdown on that, I think, has made it dangerous and a little bit landmine like when you're buying something that you really have to understand it. So that being said, I'm not saying, land is perfect. I mean, people can still dump, people can still do things that have harmed it. But I guess what I'm saying is I think it's a little easier to see what encumbers it, what are the barriers for me to really fully entitle and package this thing. And then, yeah, do I have anything hazardous on there? I think that's a little easier from a land standpoint versus when you're trying to develop an asset or redevelop an existing asset.
Amazing, Joe. I had a previous guest talked about land development in Florida. He's been doing it. I think he's in his 70s now. He talked about how it's a long game. Some of these things are 3 years before you actually get them developed. So land development is a long game, Joe. How do you think about patience, timing, and capital allocation when you know the process can drag out?
I think you have to have more than one exit where you don't put all your eggs in one basket, hoping for the best possible outcome or the most lucrative in terms of the return. I think you still have to have some contingency planning in terms of, well, if that doesn't work, is there something else I can do with this? And is it, what's the timetable on that? To your point, yeah, some of these parcels that are raw, where it's going to take a lot of approvals, you've got to go through committees, you've got to do public hearings. It can be years. So I think having the right investor partner structure too that understands and expectations are set up front about what the timeline is going to be, possible, capital calls if you have to ever, change at what point would those be at, and just communicating that, I think, clearly to any investor that's involved in such a project. And that way they know upfront, upfront. I hopefully think with some of the reg changes that are happening now in Florida with, they've got the property tax abatement is going to be on the ballot this coming fall. I think there's going to be some changes that are going to be coming there with some of the state tech upgrades they're doing that are going to expedient a lot of this process for approvals. And I hope that it just encourages, that to accelerate a little bit. I've seen in foreign markets too, Lewis, where they're actually using tokenization from different, some of the crypto concepts in the back ends to tokenize it. I think in UAE, I think in Qatar, there's a few spots where they are actually using that to entitle land. I think the land is the number one spot to pilot this and try it. It's a lot less complex than if you're dealing with a house where you've got readings, you have inspections, etc. I think starting it at a land scale, I think would really help accelerate this in the future to cut down those times and to enable the market and the entitlement process.
What separates a disciplined developer, Joe, from someone who just gets crushed by the complexity?
I think as far as being disciplined, I think discipline starts with education and understanding fully the risks that you're going to be dealing with. You do need to be prepared for things not to go your way always. There's some properties down there right now. We've built out. We had expectations we would sell them. Market's a little slower, but the rental market is still incredibly strong. So you have to be adaptive and be willing to shift strategy and understand that there's another way out or there's another exit strategy in case the plans don't come to be. I think educating yourself with people that are real genuine practitioners is the absolute best thing you can do. I think there's a lot of gurus out there. I think cutting through that, checking receipts, getting in someone's car and going to see the projects that they've done and the deals they've done. Or they can see HUDs and legal entities, and they can see ins and outs from exits versus the buys. And I think you got to really check receipts if you're vetting and trying to inform yourself if you're a newer investor. And I think for the more disciplined investors, I think it's a commitment to continuous education and learning. And I think now, is kind of one of the touch points of the podcast here with AI. It seems like that's ever accelerating, where you almost have to be educating yourself more based on some of the things that are going on with our Department of Defense and Claude and Anthropic. It was things that I didn't even really consider necessarily as a practitioner with respect to them using the codes and trying to set some of the guardrails based on what they thought their moral compass was for the mission. And there's a lot of complexity, but also I think there's going to be a lot more enablement with AI. And I hope that that could help the business and help a disciplined investor. I really think it's a force multiplier and something that's every small business owner, large business owner should be utilizing.
Joe, if you had to name one bottleneck that eats the most time than it should every single week, what do you think it would be?
I think it's just combing through deals to make sure that what we're looking at is valued properly and it fits our buy box. We have been testing it with some of the AI analytics just to give it an initial screen, kind of a green light check, in both of those areas just to make sure it kind of fits. It's helping. It's something in beta for us. We're working on it now. I would say that's probably the most amount of time that we have. We've automated a lot of the admin behind the scenes, a lot of the financials. I mean, we're at a conceptual kind of initial stage. So I think it's very important to still validate things and kind of watch the AI as well to make sure that it's behaving and doing the things that you're intending it to do. But that is something I think is going to be a major sense of enablement and will really allow investors and owners to focus on the business, the relationships, the people, and putting ourselves out there in the market versus being, tied up with minutia behind the scenes. So I hope that this is going to be the end state of what AI could bring, and I'm very excited by what it's already doing.
Excellent. Let's shift gears a little bit and talk more about the AI. We are the AI Edge podcast. You said you're open to talking about the changes in tech and AI are bringing to land development. Where do you see the biggest opportunity in technology in your world?
I think full vertical integration of the business where you are able to run different technology to really enable certain parts of it. Are we at a point where I think AI is going to just AI to AI and people are out of the equation? I don't think so yet. Personally, I think there may be some process tasks that are kind of behind the scenes. But I think if a business is going to be buying from another business and they're doing business for the first time, I kind of want to meet the person or I'd want to, at least get on a phone call with them and just see how their modus operandi is, how they are as a person, a character, and then do I have a good feeling or am I left with a good impression at the end where I want to move forward. I really think that with AI, I think that it's going to enable a lot of the back end processes that we do today that are onerous and tedious and take a lot of our time. A lot of the financial reconciliation, giving us the first legal opinion on some of the contracts, or hey, can you summarize what the key points are? Or hey, can you write a contract for me where you at least get it 80, 90% there, and then you discuss it with your legal team, or you have some points that you want to include in whatever type of sale contract you're going to be using. Market research. I mean, I remember when I'm flashing back here 20 years, but I remember when we were researching a first time client that we would take on, Lewis, it would take staff associates a couple days. I mean, the internet was in its dawn. You didn't have the information like you have out there now. Now I can go to Claude or to Grok or one of them, and I can say, "Hey, this is a client I'm considering taking on, or this is a market I'm considering entering. Can you give me a demographic? Can you give me this XYZ, the economics, how many population?" A minute later, and it's like all your works cited. Of course, you've got to validate and check, but it's like the amount of effort that that used to take where you can do a pre-screen of someone now. Folks like us that are investors that wanna mix and mingle. Hey, pull me all the RIA events in New England. Every single one paid, free, every single one you can find publicly sourced online that's open to the public. And then you get a table of probably more than you could even ever address, that are on there, but at least you got your pick of the litter, of what you wanna do. So it's amazing the capabilities of it, and I think it's only going to get better and better. It's really exciting to see what's going to happen with some of these AI agents and more of the bots, and as we get more automated with it, and that's, pushed on customers and pushed on vendors a little bit more where they can interact with the business that way if they choose. I think that that's a great model. I try to leave it that way now where they can reach a live person in the business if the person chooses. But we're rolling that out now where if they want to talk to a chat bot or at least ask a quick question, and maybe it's a weekend where we don't have someone immediately available, there is some frontline support to help with that. I do think that's an important thing, but I don't ever think the human touch is going to be going away, Lewis. I think people do business with people. I don't think the machines are fully in control yet. I think there's a level of confidence and insurance of dealing with someone that is an operator, as a principal, and a solid person versus like, is this the Terminator I'm dealing with here? Or am I dealing with, the real deal? So I think that that's an important distinction. And I don't think that that's going to go away anytime soon.
I think the human portion of it is still very, very important. The human
Great.
aspect. I mean, relationship, right? I mean, we got to build relationships. I have always said I'm not in the real estate game. I'm actually in the relationship building business. So it's all about relationships.
100. I don't think that that's going to change anytime soon.
I agree. Do you see technology helping more on the front end, site selection, underwriting, feasibility, or more in the project management and execution side?
I think it's going to be both. I think on the front end, I definitely think that we're going to be able to really dial in the AI code in the LLMs to at least have your initial projects that are pitched to you or whatever you're looking at for leads to see if it meets your minimum buying criteria. I think that that's going to be a very helpful time saving screener for busy business owners and developers like us, where we can just look and see really quickly, does this even meet our initial screen? I think with them putting some type of underwriting pro forma model together, I think would also be tremendously helpful, with the right assumptions and with validation. I think writing any type of offering material would be, this is more the front end of the deal where you've got to, if you've got pitches and you've got investors that are going to be there and you've got to present it, I think help with that will be tremendously helpful. And at least if it's a first pass where it gets it where it's 85, 90% there, and then you've got to put your final touch on it to, get it where it really needs to be. I think that that's really, really value add. And I think for small business practitioners, I think that this is the force multiplier where now you're at a level field with the bigger companies where you can use that and let it run in the background after you feed the model and you get something back. And it's like, okay, I can do now and present it at the same rate the bigger companies can. And I think where opportunities where you need to make a decision quickly to say yes and secure something, that may be the edge to actually locking up that deal ahead of another investor that you're competing with. So I look at it as if you're not using it, it's going to be an adverse selection tactic where you are going to render yourself the slower principal, and you may just, you know, automatically weed yourself out of the deal because it's speed to decision, speed to commit. And I think that that's where AI is really going to be the most valuable. On the back end, the project end side, yes, I think it's going to help manage projects, your Gantt charts, your timetable. Maybe it helps automate some of the communication when you have follow-ups with vendors and subcontractors and different counterparties in your firm. I think it's going to help with that. I think it's really got to be overseen. And I do think that some areas where you've got to, if you're doing construction, where you may have people that are maybe tech disconnected in the field or not as tech disconnected because they're doing something hands-on, it's still going to require, I think, a personal touch to make sure those things get there, get the message gets through them, and gets delivered, and the deliverable gets taken care of timely. I don't think the people are going to be going away though with it. I think we're going to be more enabled by it, and I think people are going to become more valuable the more they can wrap themselves in this AI tech and the more they can do with it. If you're more productive, Lewis, as a solopreneur or as a small business owner, you're now able to do more deals. Or if you're an employee, if you're able to manage, 4 projects instead of 2 because you now have the tools, you're more valuable as a result. So I have a little bit of a contrary view about. I don't think it's going to nuke the workforce as we think it's going to, and I think it's going to be a creative destruction process, much like the Industrial Revolution, right? You had the horse plow, come
I
through,
love that.
right?
I love that. Yeah.
Before you had guys that were, turning the fields with the shovels. So, of those guys that now didn't have to do that after the horse plow, came into existence, some became blacksmiths, some became farriers, some became carpenters, some maybe mined, some became loggers. Did you have a few that became maybe vagrants, alcoholics? Yes. But collectively, society ended up better off. The Industrial Revolution happened over 20 years. I think this AI thing that we're just kind of stepping through the threshold of now is going to be great disruption in 5 years. So, and I don't think there's a sector it's not going to touch. There's certain things that I think it will touch more than others, but I think the rate of change. I think we're at Industrial Revolution 2.0, and I think learning and embracing this any way you can is going to make you valuable. So if something does happen to your current role or your job or your industry is marginalized by what's coming with AI, you still have the tool set and the skill set to retool and go do something else that is productive and valuable to someone else. So I think in this whole thing, I think that's the most important piece to keep perspective of now about what's coming with AI.
I think AI is a tool. It's here to help us rather than replace us. But
Absolutely.
I love what you talked about having a plow. The guy who came up with the tractor, he's just going to outwork you, right? The guy down the street that had a tractor, you can't compete with him, right? With your plow.
Right. But that guy now needs a mechanic.
He
He
does.
needs a mechanic. He needs someone to fix it. There needs to be a place to store it. So I think that this is what people are missing is this is going to create new industries. It's going to enable our space industries. It's going to cause a hyper development of our energy infrastructure and satellite infrastructure. So there's going to be a dawn of new work and new industries and jobs that are created from this. And I think it's going to be at a multiple of the scalar as far as what most people I think are expecting it to be. I read something too about Musk with his his uh, his SpaceX program where he filed with the FCC to put all the satellites and all the data centers in space. He's like, I'm tired of dealing with states and trying to build out a footprint, get energy for it. He said, getting a power plant and getting the rights is the hardest part of this whole thing. He says, I can just fire these things into orbit. And he says, and then eventually when we get to the moon, he says, we can start mining there because there's silica. Like I mean, he thinks at a different scale, but it's like, he already filed with the FCC to do this. He's going to will this into existence as the next, big idea. So when you see where this is heading, and then you see like Well, the benefit is now Earth becomes a park. We don't have all this infrastructure here. It's in space. So, our lives are going to change and evolve with this, I think, in ways that are far beyond what we can even imagine today.
One of my business partners is buying land for data centers and development. Is that something that you're also partaking in?
I am not on the data center rush. I'm a little bit when I see the Blue Origins and the SpaceXs of the world, I think that there is an immediate need to have data centers here, but I do think longer term, 3 to 5 year horizon, I think a lot of that is going to be trending into space. So there would have to be some type of alternative exit for that if it's not no longer used as a data center. Maybe there's jet power generation assets on there that I think are still going to be needed. I really think that that's going to be the ticket out. You really want to make sure I think you have power generation on site if you're going to be doing that here just for that contingency. I am not in that space, no.
Excellent. What part of the development workflow still feels really manual still in the land development portion of it?
That's a really good question. I still do quite a bit of email every day with respect to different vendors. I know there's like suggested responses and things like that. I also think to myself, if I wasn't doing it, would I then lose line of sight and visibility to what's happening? So there's almost like a balance where I think the work you do, it needs to make sure you have like a prism into the business where you have a looking glass where you can see what's going on in all the different areas in real time. I think automating that beyond where you're not looking at it, I think as an owner, you're going to get removed and then it could actually blindside and hurt you. As far as a specific process, some of the legal work right now still feels very manual heavy. A lot of the finance stuff, I mean, we may use it to help with some of the models, but you still have to refine it. You still have to, challenge the assumptions, make sure that, they're real, know the numbers in and out. And a lot of that is coming from a human story, not necessarily one from AI or that you can program. So that part of it feels a little bit onerous right now. I think a lot of that's going to get more automated, but I also think that's where there's going to be the human edge over the AI edge is going to be getting the story around the numbers, understanding what's driving any of the changes or the opportunity. And I think that that's going to be a part that's going to be more human enabled than AI enabled. But I think having the AI to help with some of the models and the process on the back end is tremendously helpful.
Absolutely. Joe, let me ask you this directly. So, what part of your business still lives really heavily in spreadsheets, inboxes, manual follow up that you wish you could just run much cleaner?
The bookkeeping I wish was totally in there. We're transitioning now, but I wish it was totally in there. We still use a lot of spreadsheets for doing, our pro formas and some of the modeling. It just is the easiest form. The AI does enable and help that, and at least comes up with a first pass. But a lot of that is still in there. A lot of the administrative pieces with governments, as far as the billing, the notices, a lot of that when you're dealing with government agencies feels a little bit clunkier as well. Making your tax bill payment, checking on permit status, checking approvals, any of the correspondence that we have with cities and towns and states definitely seems a little bit clunkier. And that's an area that I hope, we were able to remove that friction point with technology.
Absolutely. If one workflow in your company became dramatically more efficient in the next 12 months, what would that create the biggest payoff?
I think it would unlock more opportunity time for us to look at new deals. And I think it would just accelerate how much more we could evaluate and look at a weekly basis. That number is, it's tough to quantify what the benefit will be, but there'd be a high ROI on that. The more you can look at, the more you can get your arms around. I think the more you can pursue. And again, I think those are the processes that would be the lowest hanging fruit for automation is a lot of the stuff with legal, the finance and the accounting pieces and the back end bookkeeping, and then also any interface that we have with government agencies.
Let's dig a little deeper. If your deal volume doubled tomorrow, Joe, what breaks first operationally?
I don't know if we have enough people to do all the underwriting and the finances for the deal volume if it were to double. But if we were able to do that, we could definitely build it. I would build it right away. If deal flow doubled, I would build it out in a heartbeat. I wouldn't hesitate.
Where do you see single family and land development marketing evolving over the next 2 to 3 years? We're going to talk a little bit about market outlook.
Okay, so I think we're in a phase right now where there's definitely a migration that's going on. I think there's a lot of states that are implementing high tax, high cost utility policies, kind of strange immigration policies. And I think what it's going to do is it's going to push people to migrate to states that have lower tax, lower total cost of living basis, lower utilities, better school systems, lower tax basis or no property tax, no income tax states. And it's no surprise that the biggest states with the biggest inflows that have been been the Carolinas, it's been Tennessee, it's been Florida, it's been Texas. I think Arkansas has been on fire as well. There's a number of others, but I know those have been the big ones, and it's going to be the same states that there's an exodus, a net exodus every year, which is California, Washington State, Massachusetts. I know Connecticut has lost some people, and a lot of Vermont is losing a lot of people. Illinois, a lot of these states where you don't have friendly business policy, you don't have friendly tax policy, and there is just there's no handle on spending, and there's no visibility or there's no political will to want to change it. That being said, I think from a land single family standpoint, I think that's going to drive the biggest opportunity for land entitlement and development because people are going to be leaving those states and they're going to be wanting to move to a state where it's friendlier. So the ones that I mentioned, I'm very, very bullish on as far as land entitlement and development. Now, I think that also has to be coupled with rates. And, our rates have been higher for a little bit longer. I think as you get below that 6% on the 30 year and we get to 4.5, 5, I really think that that's going to be the fast thaw mark where things really accelerate off the sidelines. I think once you see it drop below 5, you're really moving the needle and you're taking out about an extra car payment of interest a month for most people that are buying a new home or they're rate locked now where they're in a 3% mortgage and they don't want to step up to a 6, so they say I'm going to just stay put. I'll improve my house or I'll stay put and wait, and then it creates the problem where you don't unlock any resale inventory because I think people are staying in their houses now nationally 13 years on average, which is the longest it's ever been in history. Pre-COVID, pre-2020, it was between 5 and 7 years is when everyone was moving. So we're double, now approaching triple of what the national average used to be for a long period of time. So I hope that with rates coming down, with migration and people moving, I think those states there's going to be a lot of opportunity that I mentioned before. Those are the areas that I think nationally are going to be the best places to play. Now, with that said, where we are in New England, I mean, there's a lot of older buildings, there's a lot of mill and redevelopment plays that are out there. People are still going to need housing, but I just think that the brighter opportunities are going to be in those states with the best fiscal policy, the best immigration, the best job creation, the best energy policy, and the best tax basis that just yield the lowest cost of living, but also have good education systems and are really looking out for their residents or are accountable to the taxpayer. So I think that those are going to be the areas where you're going to have the best development. Yeah, and rates. I mean, rates. We'll see. We'll see what happens with the Fed and Kevin Warsh. I think he's supposed to be. I think it's almost 2 months, almost to the days when Powell's term is up, and then Warsh is supposed to be in if he gets approved, and we will see what happens there. But I think there's a lot that they can do with the Fed's balance sheet to really help housing policy that they haven't done. There's a lot with tax policy that they can do. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think that those are the biggest opportunities going forward.
Well said, Joe. Do you think the winners in the next phase will be the people with the best land, the best capital, or the best systems?
I think systems are going to be of more importance. And what I was saying before, I think it's going to be an adverse selection thing. I think the shops that don't adopt or invest in the best systems are going to be extinct because you're going to be able to compete with smaller shops that have less capital that are going to have access to the deals if they are more nimble with their systems and dialed into the markets that they're practicing in. I think as a result of that, they will be able to attract more capital. because those investors that see that their operators will invest or will partner with them, they'll have no problem doing that. So I think systems, there's going to be a rise in importance of for a lot of businesses, now. And I think also the ones that choose not to go all in and invest in it, I think are going to be extinct. I look at when I was at PwC and practicing, the banks and the insurance companies, and even to this day, are still using mainframe systems. They're using stuff from 50, 60 years ago. It was almost like an oligopoly where there was a gentleman's agreement. They're like, we don't really need to invest that much. We'll just keep, we'll put band-aids and bubble gum on everything. We'll keep the shop running. They have such scale of everything else. They can threaten any of the new entrants, but they don't really have to overinvest in what they're doing now. I think a small shop can come along with better systems and really disrupt, meaningfully disrupt and change the landscape. So I think now, if there's a conscious business decision not to pursue AI and not to push forward with investment, I really think it's going to hurt. And it could be the Achilles heel in a lot of these big enterprises if they don't choose to systematize accordingly. Also, if you're not utilizing people that can be doing higher and better use of their time and their talents, now you've kind of created an albatross system where you have people that are working well below what they should be doing. If they were AI or more tech enabled, it actually adds value back to the business. So I think we're at a choke point here for a lot of the big enterprise, and we'll see. And I think there's going to be a lot of landscape shifting and changes that are going to come from this personally.
Fantastic, Joe. That hit hard. Let's have a little bit of fun here. Lightning round, some
Yeah.
quick hits. You ready?
Yeah.
One word that describes your career journey.
Atypical.
Why that word?
I started as kind of a traditional finance guy and an agent, and now I'm back to developing, even though I started off in real estate some 20 years ago. So a lot of people would have probably expected me to stay in the corporate world. I've had a very atypical career path.
Most underrated skill in land development.
I think tenacity, following up, staying on deals, chasing down leads that may be dead. I think those are the ones that pay the greatest.
Biggest mistake newer developers make.
Being money focused and not solution focused, and really not understanding the market or the exits and the different levers that they can pull to enable both. I think those are the most important things.
One habit that has helped you succeed.
I think discipline, personal discipline, motivation comes and goes. There's days we don't feel like doing things. If you're disciplined and you're committed to something, you're going to keep going forward day after day, and then the results will begin to accrue, and it'll become a self-perpetuating circle.
Funny, the next question is what matters more today, speed or discipline?
Lewis, that's a tie. I think it's both. I think they both matter. I don't think you can, you look at the success of like an Elon Musk. He is insanely focused on speed. Insane.
Right.
Like to a point where it's not normal. But look at what he's able to achieve. And also he's disciplined about the execution. So when I think of the extreme examples, I think they're almost equal. You have to be fast and you have to be disciplined. I think it's equal.
Amazing. One last one, Joe. What does success mean to you now?
Having freedom to do the things I want to do when I do them, and not having a boss or some corporate overlord over me, and also opportunities like this where I get to, we met a few weeks ago on LinkedIn, and this has been a very great discussion, and it made a great contact out of it. And so this is the best part. This is the Super Bowl for me, is being able to connect with people, spontaneously, connect and share talents and ideas. And I love that. So it's a great thing. But that's what success means to me, is being able to share that. Young people you're working with, and then having the freedom to do what you want in this world. I can't think of a great.
Absolutely, Joe. I completely agree. Completely blessed by learning and spending some time with you and connecting with you. I feel like this is fantastic. That's success. Honestly, it's all about ultimate freedom, right? Just
Absolutely.
being able to do, have, see, be wherever you want without having to be a slave, I guess. I don't know if I could say that, but
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Joe, for anyone listening who wants to connect with you, learn more about Palms and Tides, or follow your work, where's the best place to find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I have a verified profile on there under my name, Joe Rosinski. You'll see the Palms and Tides logo that's on there and my work history. And then you can also go to our website at www.palmsandtides.biz. You can send us a note there to connect with any business interests or requests. And if you have any deals to pitch down there, there's a place you can put it on the sell your land page of that as well.
Absolutely love it. We'll put all those in the show notes. Joe, this was a great conversation. I truly appreciate your compliment. I appreciate the way that you broke down the evolution from fix and flip, land development, and how you think about regulation, execution, and the future of business. For everyone listening, if you got value from this episode, share it with another operator, investor, or builder who's trying to understand where land development and smart systems are heading. Joe, thanks again for joining us on the AI Edge podcast. Thanks.
Thanks, Lewis. Thanks for having me on today.
It was a pleasure.